Welcome to Speaking of Higher Ed, Conversations on Teaching and Learning. I'm Jeff Mastromonaco. This podcast is produced by the Center for Instructional Innovation at Augusta University. Please take a moment to rate, review, subscribe, and share this podcast. This is episode 25, and for this month's topic of undergraduate research, I had a conversation with Drs. Michael Rifenburg and Kristine Johnson, authors of the book A Long View of Undergraduate Research, Alumni Perspectives on Inquiry, Belonging, and Vocation.
I want to thank you both for being on Speaking of Higher Ed today. My guests today are Drs. Michael Rifenburg and Kristine Johnson. Dr. Rifenburg is an associate professor of English at the University of North Georgia, where he serves as co-director of first-year composition and is a senior faculty fellow of scholarly writing within UNG's Center for Teaching, Learning, and Leadership. Dr. Johnson is an associate professor at Calvin University in Michigan. She currently serves as the University Rhetoric Director, directing first-year writing, rhetoric across the curriculum, and the Rhetoric Center. They have co-authored the book A Long View of Undergraduate Research, Alumni Perspectives on Inquiry, Belonging, and Vocation, and that examines the lifelong influence of undergraduate research experiences. I want to thank you both for being here today on Speaking of Higher Ed.
Thanks so much for having us.
Oh, yeah. So before we begin, we like to have our guests tell us the path that led them to their current role. So Dr. Rifenburg, I guess we'll start with you.
Sure. Nothing remarkably interesting here. I went to undergrad at the Georgia College and State University down in Milledgeville, Georgia, the capital of Georgia before the Civil War. So I went to school there, had a wonderful time at that liberal arts focused university, received an English degree with a history minor. After that, when I graduated, lived at home for a couple months and ended up taking a full-time job in elementary school, where I was a full-time sub, finding subs or filling in classrooms myself. The very first thing I ever taught, Jeff, was the digestive system to fourth graders. And so that went about as well as you think that would go. And so from there, I taught at a private high school in Conyers, Georgia. I taught literature there. I coached the soccer team. I helped with the men's basketball team. I then went on to Auburn University for my master's. That was a 2-year program. I went to the University of Oklahoma for my PhD. Did that and looking for jobs, and the University of North Georgia allowed me to come and work with them, which is really exciting. My father, many years ago, went to and graduated from the University of North Georgia, so I have small memories from my childhood of walking around that campus. And so I've been at the University of North Georgia now for just a decade.
Great. Dr. Johnson?
Yeah, so I did my undergraduate degree in English at what was called Calvin College, about the same time Michael did. At the time I was an undergrad, I thought I would go to law school, and I had an English professor who steered me toward rhetoric and composition sort of at the end of college. So I did a master's and a PhD at Purdue University and spent 5 years there learning about composition theory and learning that I love directing writing programs. My first job was at Xavier University in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I was an assistant professor and directed the writing program there. And then 11 years ago, one of my college professors at Calvin died sort of unexpectedly and sort of young, opening up a position here in sort of a niche area. They were looking for a Rhet Comp person and also someone who could teach linguistics. And so that ended up being a role I could fill, and I went through the process and was hired back at my alma mater, which in the meantime has become a university now. So I now work at Calvin University, and I've been at Calvin. This is my 11th year back.
I think that's interesting and great that both of you have ended up at places that you have a personal relationship, either currently or in your past.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the book, but I guess we would start with what I would call maybe a research question. So what question or questions were you trying to answer with writing this book?
So I think one of the big questions we're asking is, I think the largest question is, do undergraduate research experiences matter, and how do they matter to the people who participated in them? And if they do, right, we thought the answer was yes, and we'd heard the answer was yes a lot of the time. If they do, what does that look like once you're out of college into your adult life, right? With some perspective, what do these experiences mean? What do they look like with the benefit of hindsight and some adult life?
Yep, I'm right there with Kristine. The wonderful thing about collaborating is we have this central question we were pursuing together, but we have some questions we're pursuing individually, some curiosities that we're individually bringing to this project. And so I'm full agreement with that big question that kind of drove this book that Kristine talked through. But just for me, I was very interested in learning from people who have just walked through undergrad research, in hearing from them what they found effective, what they did not find effective, things I might not notice from my position as a faculty member who did undergrad research several decades ago, right? And so hearing from people who just walked that trail. You know, I'm in North Georgia, so I do a lot of hiking up here. So we're talking in a metaphor, people who just got off the Appalachian Trail and saying, what was it like? Opposed to me telling you what it was like when I hiked that trail 20 years ago.
Okay. Yeah. So the alumni interviews in your book, they revealed some surprising outcomes. Was there anything that stood out to you? I guess Dr. Reifenberg, we'll start with you.
Sure. Relationships. That's what I kept hearing again and again and again, is how important these relationships are. How important it was for this student to have ice cream with their professor. How neat and cool and awesome it was to stay in a hotel room for the very first time before they presented their research, right? So these are the meaningful things that often people are taking with them, is the relationships. So that really stands out to me and just warmed my heart.
Yeah, I think the extent to which the participants talked about their mentors and the relationships was surprising because it wasn't actually a question in our protocol. It came up. Maybe another surprise for me was, many of the students we talked to were really academically successful. They were strong students, which maybe led them to undergrad research, and a lot of times. What surprised me was how transactional they were sometimes about their typical course assignments and how meaningful their undergrad research projects were to them. So these were really good students who would say, yeah, I wrote my term papers the night before and sort of did what I was required to do. But when they talked about their research, they were proud of it and invested in it in a different way. And I think maybe I would have assumed that these students viewed all of their research that way, but that wasn't the case.
So the book, it explores some moments of uncertainty for these students. Mm-hmm. How, at least I guess in the interviews that you had with these students, how did these challenges help them grow? And I guess what could faculty then learn from that would allow them to better support students?
Yeah. I can take one. So I think one of the things we noticed is that starting a project and conceptualizing a project can be really challenging outside of the, normal course requirements. And I think one of the things we took away and one of the things we recommend is that faculty mentors really give a lot of attention to the beginning of the process. Whether that means in an honors program, having a thesis prep course, or just being intentional to meet more often and talk more often at the beginning of the process, sort of orienting students in a direction that's going to be generative for them. Some of the people we interviewed had a lot of initial floundering, and that can be generative, that can really be good. But put up against the time constraints of your undergraduate career, which will end, right, in your senior year, which will end even quicker, that kind of, I think, closer support at the beginning is one way of overcoming a common challenge.
Dr. Reifenberg?
I'll speak to the end of the process as well. So Kristine's talking about how to kind of get into the project. We also think about how we get out of that project, and how mentors might come alongside students and help them see how the skills that they honed, how the dispositions they honed transfer to potential jobs, right? Or whatever that next step is, if that's a job, if that's grad school, whatever that next step is, that the experiences you're having, the good and the bad, are things that can prepare you for that next step. If we can actively talk about that and name those things and how you might engage with those challenges and how you potentially, hopefully, overcame those challenges, that's powerful information to bring into a resume, to bring into a job application, to bring into a statement of purpose for graduate school. So how we might take that undergrad research experience and then broadcast it towards what we call vocation in our book, whatever that next step is.
You talked about, I guess, vocational clarity a little bit. Can you share some examples of how this maybe happened in some unexpected ways?
Yeah. So I don't know if this is unexpected so much as sort of a progression that opened up. One of the people we interviewed started college as, I believe, a double major in geography and writing. And during her time in college, she had this undergraduate research experience where she learned a lot about GIS, mapping, and geographic information systems. But she also learned a lot through her research about the ways that socioeconomics and local policy and national policy intersect with, the way people live and social justice issues. And so for her research, I think, made her attuned to these kinds of questions. And so when she went into the workplace, she really started pursuing for herself questions of, okay, when I work for this local municipal transport agency, do the changes on this bus route lead to economic impact for certain groups, right? Are these changes just? She's now several years into her career and involved in a social justice organization in her professional community. And I think she would trace the beginning of that to her undergraduate research, where that question was first introduced, and it was a path, she followed. I think Michael probably has a similar story to tell, but I will also say sometimes in undergraduate research, the vocational clarity came in learning that this was not something they were passionate about for the rest of their lives, right? We had people who were certain they would go to law school, and in the process of doing research in some areas realized that was not the case. And I think that's a really important kind of vocational clarity too.
Anything to add, Dr. Rifenburg?
Yeah, the story that sticks out to me, long after we've done the data collection, written about the book, is a story a student told. She was doing her undergraduate research in the psychology department, and she was focusing on an honors thesis on bullying and the impacts, emotional impacts of bullying, particularly how memories might stay with you and surface and unpredictable moments and times. And I remember sitting in the room with her during her honors thesis defense, talking about bullying, talking about her study, asking about her data collection methods. Well, then fast forward 5, 6, 7 years later, we connect with her on Zoom. She's now working for a domestic violence agency, local, and she's going into high schools, and she's going into middle schools, and she's talking about toxic relationships, and she's talking about signs of abuse, physical, verbal, sexual abuse. And she's talking about how to navigate those, and she's advocating for the victims, right? And so she's able to trace that back to the work that she did. And she's not talking about qualitative research. She's not talking about statistical analysis. She's talking about real world issues in her community and trying to do that and doing this very effectively as a way to connect with middle school boys, girls, children, right? Such a powerful story that she told about taking those skills, oral communication, presentation skills, and how she's bringing that to various audiences in really impactful ways.
Yeah, the skills and the purpose, right? Both of them, yeah.
So we talked about mentoring a little bit and how important those relationships are. So why do you feel that that's so impactful? And then what can institutions do to foster that meaningful relationship?
I think I'll maybe take the first part of that question. I think back maybe to my own research mentors. I think there is something special in emerging adulthood, right? When you're the age of a college student, or maybe even in high school. For an adult who is not your parent and not another family member, to take you seriously and be invested in your growth in that way. And I think one of the things that all of our participants appreciated about their mentors, and most really did appreciate their mentors, I think was the way that relationship gave them a different view of their institution. They learned about how universities work. They learned what professors do. And they also felt connected to these people in different ways than you would just a normal professor, right? I think Michael and I are both fortunate to work at institutions that place a high value on the undergraduate experience and undergraduate teaching. But I think the undergraduate research experience adds this other layer.
Dr. Reifenberg?
I just want to name that mentoring is hard. It's really hard. And it's something we're invited to do as faculty members, like advising, in which, at least for me, I can't speak for Kristine or my colleagues, but I never received formal training in grad school on how to be an advisor, on how to be a mentor, right? That's hard to do. We're so thankful for the large body of research we now have on effective mentoring practices. So it's not a void that we don't know anything about. We have the scholarship on that. But often, and again, I can only speak for myself, I'm moved into a faculty position working at an undergrad institution where I'm invited to do a lot of mentoring and a lot of advising. Those are different but very similar. And I have no formal training at all. But I'm also evaluated, particularly on my advising, right? So I'm thankful for the research we have on mentoring. I do want to name that it's very hard to do. And I'm so thankful for particularly academic staff in student affairs that come alongside, and advising professional advisors that come alongside faculty and helping us understand what are some practical things we can do to improve our advising, improve our mentoring practices, and see value in that. Because again, that's not something we had training in at all. And it's exciting work, but it's hard work.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we know is hard, and we cite this research in the book, is I think a good mentor balances freedom and control, right? Giving the students you're working with enough freedom to, pursue their own questions and do their own work and really grow as scholars, but enough control or support that they're not going to just fall off the side of the boat and sink and flounder. I think that's, at least for me as a mentor, thinking about that that balance of when do I support you in really specific ways to keep you safe, and when do I give you that freedom. I think that's something we can talk more about and support one another and learning how to do. And that to me is one of the things that makes it hard.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So in interviewing the students, because mentoring specifically is an area of interest for me as it deals with undergraduate research and kind of identifying how, I guess, mentors feel that they do with mentoring competencies and how the students feel about that. Did you find that the students maybe identified certain traits or mentoring competencies that they kind of found more effective, or maybe made reference to this person was a better communicator, or this person, I think, like you said, maybe gave me more freedom?
I think two things that emerged that I remember pretty clearly. So one is time, right? The students who spent more time with their mentors, whether one-on-one or in a group of researchers, I think really appreciated that relationship more. That's kind of hard news, right? Because I think time is a scarce commodity in higher education. I think another thing was clear expectations, right? Especially if students were working maybe in the context of a summer fellowship program or a Students as Partners project. When students felt like they knew what their mentor expected for them in the next week, in the next month, overall, they felt like the relationship was easier and they could be more successful.
Yeah, the clear expectations with, as Kristine has mentioned before, with the room to explore, to play, to improvise, right? That we have these clear benchmarks, to use that term broadly, that the mentor can forecast a little bit into the future about where we might go with this project so that the student can move forward with some level of confidence, right? Because we got to remember a lot of this is for a grade. This is under time constraints. There are a lot of parameters that we build around undergrad research for understandable reasons. And so making sure we're clear on what these benchmarks are, but also giving students room to explore, to try, to maybe go down a path that yields not a lot of meaningful benefit, right? That's research, right? The ability to explore and learn and change, and I love the word improvise, but doing that within some sort of structure that the mentor can clearly articulate so the student knows, has a broad idea of where they are going.
So undergraduate research can differ across different fields. What challenges and opportunities do you think that there are when you try to adapt it to different fields, like maybe arts or sciences?
The history of undergraduate research starts in chemistry departments, right, at small liberal arts colleges like the one I'm sitting in today. And that model of research really was pretty closely aligned to what a graduate assistant would do, at an R1 university. So undergraduate research started as, we're sort of going to treat you like younger graduate students in our lab. And science labs have things that inexperienced researchers can do and grow into and gain more responsibility. I think the challenge, or a challenge, of undergraduate research, I'll say in the humanities, is the sense that much of our research is very solitary and often text-based, right? I'm in an English department with a lot of literature scholars, and their research looks like a lot of reading and textual analysis and sitting alone. And I think my most successful undergraduate research projects with students are ones closer to what we've done in this book, where we're doing qualitative work and interviewing people and surveying people and doing something that's, I think, more amenable to groups of people working together, and even benefits from groups of people working together.
Dr. Rifenburg, anything to add?
Sure. I think the humanities can learn a lot from what our friends in the STEM world are doing, and I think our friends in the STEM world can learn a lot from the humanities. What I mean by that is what I see my colleagues in chemistry and psychological science and kinesiology doing really well is building in almost like a assembly line for undergraduate research, that you start early in your college career, then you move into it more in depth, and then you're doing it more near your senior year, and then you're the fourth author on a publication, right? And so they have this really robust laboratory, literally, in which they're inviting people to come and experiment and play and build research alongside faculty members. They do that really, really well. The humanities, what we do really well is find students who want to pursue a project, and we say, go forth and learn and check in if you have questions, right? And in both of these models, the strengths can become the weaknesses. Sometimes in the STEM world, there's not room for Michael to pursue his own individual project because I'm on a $2 million NSF grant and it's due at the end of the semester. And it's not, Michael, what do you think you're going to do? I'm part of a large team. I'm helping push this thing forward because time and money is on this. A weakness of the humanities is now a student, to use Kristine's term, floundering. They're in the library, surrounded by texts on William Faulkner, and have no idea what they want to research, and they have no idea what they're going to write about, and they're not even sure where their faculty member is, right? And
For example.
So in both of these, the strengths can become the weaknesses. I would love to see more structure, more team-based, more collaborative writing in the humanities. I would like to see more room for improvisation, more room for individual projects, pursuing those individual passions in the STEM world. So in both of these spaces, we do things really well, but both of these spaces, that strength can become that weakness.
So when we were talking about vocational outcomes and vocational clarity before, so in interviewing students, because now that we're talking about disciplines a little bit, did you find a difference in maybe how after college was affected by discipline? That maybe some students that were in the humanities found more or less benefit than somebody in a STEM as far as undergraduate research goes?
That's a little bit of a tricky question because our participant pool was geared pretty heavily toward the humanities and social sciences. And I think one reason for that is, the research on this is good, that if you are an undergraduate researcher in STEM, the likelihood that you might attend graduate school in that field goes up quite a bit. So that is one vocational path, right? And an important one. I think what I enjoyed from our interviews was that most of the students we interviewed did not go straight to master's or PhD programs in their discipline after graduation. Most were out in the work. I think if we were to do the math, maybe 20% of them had. But the other 80% were out in the workforce doing lots of different things, which I think helped us understand how these experiences might be transferable or not. Right, we avoided that sort of undergraduate research to graduate school pipeline in our pool.
So if we're talking about undergraduate research in general, how do you see it evolving, and do you see any trends, with trends like online learning and a push for equity? How do you see you are evolving?
Opening up more opportunities for students to pursue projects that they're passionate about, and making those opportunities clear early in their college career, and not when they're about to graduate learning, oh, that was kind of cool. I wish I would have learned about that undergraduate research opportunity as I'm about to get my diploma. So as we broadly, U.S. higher education, particularly undergraduate focus institutions, think a lot about the first year experience and bringing students into that first year and how valuable living on campus is and belonging, how important that is for retention and persistence rates. How might undergrad research become a robust part of that first year experience? Not necessarily because every student might want to pursue undergrad research or should or might even, but opening up those doors early. All right. We heard so many stories of students getting involved in undergrad research because they happen to hear something by chance, or one faculty member mentioned to them by chance. It's not because there's a gigantic QR code in the cafeteria that they scan to become a part of a project, right? These opportunities are sometimes hard to find. And so how might this become a really robust part of what many people are calling that first year experience? And I would love to see, and I can imagine a world in which more students are involved because it's structured into the first year and there's clear on-ramps to get involved in this kind of work.
I mean, I think another thing with undergraduate research just being more available, more equitable, is something we didn't address in the book, but it's the idea of course-based undergraduate research, right? So taking these characteristics of undergraduate research with faculty mentoring and asking real questions, and using real methods in the discipline, and actually integrating those into courses in the core curriculum, courses in the major curriculum. There's, again, good evidence from the sciences that incorporating undergraduate research projects in, introductory biology courses really supports learning and retention. We've worked with authors at Ohio State University who, in their sort of gateway to the major course for the writing major there, incorporate undergraduate research type projects in that course, which again is good for new students in the discipline. And if those students choose to write theses, right, they're already sort of a step ahead in terms of methods and maybe potential projects. In the book, we just wanted to look at students who had had more intensive experiences, in part because we have a list of those, and we don't have a good list of students who may have experienced this kind of thing in a course. But course-based undergraduate research is, I think, certainly where things are moving in the future too.
I did think it was interesting in the book. I think it was somewhere in the beginning where you talked about how some of these students don't actually remember the projects themselves, but it was more of the experience, and whether that is, the relationship that they have with their mentor, or I think it was Claire that was sitting in a library and just perusing over articles and things, and just how she got so much out of that, but as time went by, the actual project itself was kind of foggy. So I just thought that was really an interesting, I guess, commentary on the experience itself.
Yeah, and Claire is one. So most of our participants for the book were relatively young alumni. I don't think any of them were 30 yet. But we did kind of at the end of the project contact and interview alumni who are essentially our age or a little older. So those who had done this research, yeah, over 20 years ago. And Claire is one of those, right? So she is probably in her late 40s now. Her research was a long time ago. And yeah, she shared that she does not remember the thesis of the project or when she gave a presentation, sort of the content, but she remembers the feeling of getting to work in an archive for the first time.
So, for schools that have fewer resources, what practical steps do you think that they can take to create impactful undergraduate research experiences? Dr. Reifenberg, we'll let you go first.
Sure. I'll go back to that idea of finding ways to invite students into undergraduate research projects early in their career. If you have a class that introduces English majors to English studies, for example, having some potential on-ramps in which they could go to begin an undergraduate research project there. If you have classes that attract a wide variety of majors, I teach a class like English 1101. What are opportunities that we can establish there to get them involved in undergraduate research projects? So it's spending time with a plan of study, it's spending time with like a curriculum map, and being creative about how we might invite students early in their college career into undergraduate research experiences and how we might help them progress alongside those as they move through their majors.
I think we could also think of undergraduate researchers as sort of an underutilized resource on a lot of campuses. I think some of the most exciting undergraduate research on my campus, or at least exciting to me, happens in the research methods class for the social work majors. So this is course-based undergraduate research, but each semester the professor, gains IRB approval to do this, but does research that is needed on campus. So looking at what is the experience of male students in student housing, what is the experience of international students and the dining hall, right? There are entities on campus who want to know things. They want things studied. Very often undergraduates are the ideal people to be asking these questions and be conducting interviews. So I think looking at what needs to be done in these cash-strapped institutions and saying, oh, undergraduate researchers and courses on the books and faculty who already reach here could actually be the people to do some of that work. And everyone benefits from that.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to argue with the data when you're making a play for funds or other things, resources, and then you have data that's to back up those requests.
Yeah.
So that's great. Well, my guests today are Dr. Michael Rifenburg and Dr. Kristine Johnson, and the book that they have co-authored is A Long View of Undergraduate Research, Alumni Perspectives on Inquiry, Belonging, and Vocation. And before we go, I'd like to ask our continuing the conversation question, which is, what advice would you give faculty starting or expanding undergraduate research, especially on managing time, like we talked about before, funding or balancing mentoring with their own research?
This isn't quite a time management answer, but it's the answer I might give. I think if you are headed in to being an undergraduate research mentor for the first time, let's say in something like a summer fellowship program, I think the number one thing is expect that it will take time, and don't sign up until you're ready to give that time. Right? I think if you're gonna enter into this, know that it will take time. And I think the other just encouragement I would give is I really appreciate undergraduate research projects because they keep me accountable. This year I'm working actually with a first year researcher. So I have a freshman working with me all year. And knowing that she and I meet every week and we're getting work done, helps me plod along in my own work. And so I think, I think the advice I would give is it's a time investment, but know that you'll benefit from this, maybe in just ways of accountability, but you'll also benefit from it personally, I think.
Dr. Rifenburg?
Sure. As faculty members, particularly at undergraduate focused institutions, we're asked to teach, we're also asked to research, we're asked to serve in some capacity on committees. And I feel like I can make the best traction in my professional career when I can find a way to connect those three to some degree. My teaching, my service, my research are unified around something in common. By chance, often is student writing and researching and teaching student writing. And so when we can see an undergraduate research project coming alongside current work that we're doing in terms of our scholarship or our teaching or our service, so that you see this as a larger part of your professional identity instead of something you're doing on the side, that can really help faculty members, right? And then lastly, student focused, helping students pursue a project that's meaningful for them. It might be meaningful to you, but it's meaningful to them. Yep. We stay with projects long term because something within us is chasing after that question and it wants to pursue that question. And if there's not this deep curiosity and love and passion for that topic, we're not going to stay with that for the long term that's required for any sort of research, right? So making sure students are pursuing a topic that they love, not just a topic they think their faculty member would love as well.
I like that. Make it integrative, right?
Yeah.
If working with undergraduates is what unites all of the sort of good parts of your job. Right?
Yep.
Yep.
So before we go, are there any ways that our listeners can either follow you or keep up with you, perhaps on social media? Dr. Johnson?
So I will throw out that so our book was published in conjunction with the Center for Engaged Learning at Elon University, and they have put together a great website for the book. So that would be a good place to download chapter summaries, reading guides, workshop guides, and then any of the other work we're doing with this book, other podcasts and other writing we're doing would all be indexed on that page. So I think that'd be a good place to follow this project.
Yeah, I would agree. I've actually checked out the website, and it does have lots of good research questions and things like that to go with each of the chapters. So it really is good. Well, I want to thank you both for being a part of Speaking of Higher Ed. The conversation continues on our Facebook page at facebook.com/AUGCII. Please contribute your thoughts on today's topic and other episodes. You can find more on our show page, augusta.edu/innovation. Please rate, review, subscribe, and share this podcast. We release new episodes on the third Wednesday of each month in spring and fall semesters. Speaking of Higher Ed is produced by the Center for Instructional Innovation at Augusta University.